Hello friends, and welcome to the third and final part of my entry to the Avatar Hero Pose collab, where we're trying to put together the look of an intro to a superhero cartoon. So last week I drew and roughly timed out the animated second part to this collab, and that's a 4-second clip to show his power. So this week I'm drawing up the final animation, and I wanted to try to use the plastic tool as much as I could, so I had to find a good main pose. And to do it, I sketched on different frames of the same level over a few times, improving it each time until I was happy. Well, happy enough. And I know I need to work on my anatomy, and that's something I plan to work on more this year. But using the plastic tool means I've not got to work on it today. So once I had my character sketched out reasonably well, I inked over it as a final drawing. And you'll notice that I used the shift and trace feature in OpenToonz to reposition the sketch from the previous frame so that I could draw his right arm and right leg to one side. And using shift and trace is a great way to trace over a sketch that's in an earlier frame in the same column. And doing this meant that when I applied the plastic tool to it, I could reposition the arm and leg back behind the main body, so that they start off hidden but could be animated coming out from behind it. And if I'd drawn this as a single image, I couldn't do that. And I've already demonstrated this in an earlier video that I'll pop a card up about now, so if you're interested, maybe watch that first and then come back to finish this. And I'll also put a link in the description below, so check that out. So then I built the skeleton for the plastic tool and tried for the first time in an actual animation to split the mesh to try and make the movement look slightly more realistic and less like it's using the plastic tool. And this is around the right boot area and helps to not have rubber hosed legs. Instead, the top of the boot keeps its shape as the knee bends. And it worked really well, and it's definitely something I'll be doing more of. And then I created the first pose by placing the right arm and right leg back in place, and then came the interesting part, animating the skeleton. And I started with the first pose, easy enough, but then I tried using the plastic tool to make him rise straight up. But because each joint rotates around the previous, I ended up with him rising up but rotating around. And I even tried adding an extra joint outside his body, which helped a bit but wasn't quite good enough. So as there's always more than one way to do things in OpenToonz, I went back to the simple solution and used the animate tool to lift him up, which worked perfectly fine. So I spent some time after this completing the animation, following the rough poses that I'd sketched out last week, and following their timing, and trying to add some subtlety where I could, but it still looked, and looks, very much like a puppet. And I guess you can't get away from that easily. I did add a little bit of hand animation though. I drew his left arm moving up to his head, and his right hand changing position towards the end, but it's almost all puppeteered with the plastic tool. And then I added a small camera move to zoom into the character before he used his superpower, and then drew in his superpower, which was originally going to be a wavy line coming from his head, but I couldn't quite get that right, so I settled for an oval being transmitted. And I added a couple of simple glows to it, just to make it look slightly more magical. And then I collapsed that column and its effects into a sub-X sheet, so I could more easily replicate the effect without retiming it or re-adding the effect. And that worked really well. Finally, I reloaded the layer with his mask on that I drew in the first week, and amended that to work better with the animation, showing him concentrating while using his power. And then later on in the day I drew in his cape, but unfortunately my system crashed towards the end, and it lost all my footage. Which was annoying, but at least the project had saved okay. So this is the final piece, and I just had to render the 96 frames out without this temporary background, because the background will be added later to match the other submissions, so I can't wait to see that. When the final compiled animation is out, I'll let you know through Twitter, so follow me there for that, and for other OpenToonz and animation treats. And I'll be back next week when I'll be continuing work on my future armour project. And that's a Darren Tea.